the Lancet actually looked at an RCT that looked at high intensity interval training and moderate intensity continuous training, and then a control group. The control group was not sedentary. So they were encouraged to follow the National Physical Activity Guidelines. And by the end, 96% of the control group was meeting those guidelines. And there was no significant differences between the groups in cognitive function or the odds of developing mild cognitive impairment after 5 years. What do you think about that, Louisa Nicola? I'm Laurel Beversdorf, strength and conditioning coach.
And I'm Dr. Sarah Court, physical therapist.
For too long, women have been sidelined in strength training.
Oh, you mean handed pink dumbbells and told to sculpt?
Whatever that means. We're here to change that with tools, evidence, and ideas that center women's needs and voices.
Welcome to the conversation. All right. Welcome to the Movement Logic Podcast. My name is Sarah Court. I'm a physical therapist. I am your host, and I'm here with my co-host, who is also your host. Her name is Laurel Beversdorf. She is a strength and conditioning coach and a soon-to-be master of exercise science. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah. Physiology.
Sure. Whoops.
No, it's kind of the same thing, but yes.
So Laurel and I, on a regular basis, we get solicited by PR companies, and they're trying to get us to sell supplements or whatever. Like I just got one of these this morning, like a very typical one. And this typical one, I'm just going to read you a tiny bit about it. It says, "Hi, Movement Logic. I'm Gia at Grin. I match creators with brands running programs on our platform, and interactive comment, blah, blah, something, something looked like a fit sharing with you. Here's what this program includes. Affiliate, $50 per sale. You know, we sell, what does it say? Health conscious adults, 35 to 65, who want natural daily support for blood sugar, metabolism, heart health, and energy without prescription medications." I'm like, all right, fine. So that's obviously totally horseshit. And I'm going to say no to that, right? I get ones like that all the time. And I'm sure you do too, right?
Uh-huh.
Right. So I got a different kind though recently that I was like, what's going on here? So I got the email. But what I noticed that was very different about the email is usually it says something like they said in that one, where it's like affiliate $50 per social media post kind of thing or whatever, right? Like
Right.
Usually it says something like, if you hold our product and make a post about it on your page, we'll give you $50 or something like that. But this email like highlighted the fact that you weren't going to be posting on your own page. And I was like, that's weird. Because that I've never seen that before. I wonder what they're talking about. I was still not gonna do it, whatever it was, but I was kind of like, I wonder what this is. So I responded as if I was interested because I kind of wanted to just see it play out. And in my response, I asked, if this is not going to be on my social media page, where would this content be that you want me to make for you? And they responded, great, here's how to set up your audition. And I was like, what? Well, first of all, I don't want to audition for anything, but they didn't answer my original question. So I wrote back again and I was like, great, could you just explain to me where this is going to be? And essentially what they said was they couldn't tell me yet. But what I sort of figured out what it was this, which is like Cadence, that shoe that I did an episode on, they had this where you go on the Cadence website and there's like Dr. Whoozy Face, and they're saying, I love the Cadence shoe. That's the kind of thing it was for. So it was basically like, we want to take the fact that you are a physical therapist and put your face on a variety of products, web pages, being like, I endorse this product. And I was like, wow, I've never gotten that one before. I'm still saying no, but that was an interesting new variation on a theme. They'll never stop. They'll never stop. It's just crazy.
So that's about how much doctor endorsed or PT endorsed really means, folks. Like,
exactly. Right.
That's what went into that.
Exactly. Whenever you see these websites and they all have them, right? All of these supplements and products, they always have like various doctors. It's literally that person got an email saying, do you want some money? Yeah.
Did you find out how much you were going to be paid for this?
I didn't, because I didn't get past the audition stage because I was like, but no, they told me, what did they say? Other people make upwards of $6,000.
Upwards of.
Upwards of. I'm like, on what time? What over 10 years? Like, what are we talking about here?
This
Anyway,
is what I'm
that's
talking about, the transparency problem with these companies, and then just how shady they are in every single way. It's like, oh God.
yep. If you wonder why we go after all these companies and all these people all the time, this is kind of why. Like we're trying to pull back the curtain a little bit and show you, hey, some of this is actually, I mean, not some of this, I should say all of this is absolutely bullshit.
The emperor has no clothes.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, here's something a little bit better news, I think, for folks. We got
Hmm.
I mean, let me back up. It wasn't better news for the person who this happened to, but we got an email recently from one of our past Live for Longevity participants about something that happened to her.
Our past participant, Kate, apparently suffered a pretty serious fall in her garden and ended up tearing her quadriceps tendon and then had to have surgery. So she is going to be, she said to us, out of action for 6 to 8 weeks. But she noticed that the strength that she was able to build in our course, Live for Longevity, is making a huge difference in her recovery. So she lives alone, but she still finds that she's able to manage daily life because she has this increased upper body strength, she has increased single leg strength, and she noticed that immediately after the injury, she was strong enough to drag herself from the steep slope where she fell to a safer location and then lower herself down the steps to the ambulance stretcher using just her upper body strength. So she wrote to us to thank us specifically and let us know that her work, well, she let us know that our work in the course, but it was really her work in the course,
Yeah.
changed her life or helped her in this very important time where she really needed to have some strength. So she's looking forward to returning to strength training. And we were just really floored by this message. And of course, like, we're happy to hear that she's on her way to recovery and that she got this benefit from the course and was able to use it when it really, really counted.
Yeah.
And it just makes me think of all the course participants that have gone through Live for Longevity and anyone who really strength trains at all, and how the benefits of strength are sometimes realized in these particular types of unfortunate accidents or these moments of illness or these moments where we're suddenly needing to draw on some reserves, right?
Yeah.
So pretty cool story from
Yeah.
Kate. Thanks for sharing that with us, Kate. If you're
Totally.
listening.
And yeah, two things I was struck by. One is the upper body strength,
Yeah.
because for a lot of women, we tend to focus more on lower body, right? We get messages about getting a round booty, but the sort of, I think the fear, the bulky fear
Mm,
is often about upper body. Like you don't want to look like your arms are too muscular or something
right.
like that, right?
Right.
But realistically, life is going to throw shit at you.
Yeah.
And if you don't have the capacity, I mean, I'm just thinking about like the flip of this. If she had not done the course, she'd be sitting in her garden, unable to, probably, it would be much harder probably to pull herself up this hill. It would have been
Yep.
much harder to get to the ambulance.
Yeah.
Even just getting around on crutches and stuff, all of that would have been so much harder.
Yeah. And it can quickly
And
become kind of a dangerous situation,
yeah,
because
especially
you
living
can't
alone.
get,
Yeah,
yeah, you're living alone. You can't get to help. So,
right. Exactly. So, and to your point as well, that sometimes people are like, well, why am I strength training because I just want to have big muscles? What am I strength training for? We don't necessarily always think about or observe the power of this reserve, like
mm,
having this capacity in reserve
hmm,
for when life happens. So I thought that was a great testimonial from her, great story. I mean, I hate that it happened, but I love that she was ready for what happened.
yeah, we often use the analogy of a retirement plan, right? Strength is a
Hmm.
retirement plan. It's also a insurance policy.
Yes.
Right?
And
And it can act as like a backup plan. Like, oh, I
yeah,
just landed myself in a world of hurt here. And
yeah,
oh, let me call on this backup plan, which is to get myself out of this world of hurt using my physical strength.
right. It's like your emergency here in Los Angeles. Everybody has a go bag, or they should, in
Yes.
case there's an emergency,
Right.
like in case there's an earthquake, I should
Right.
say, which is
Mhm.
pretty common. But so this is like your go bag just for life, because it might not be an earthquake. It might be you fall down a hill and that's your earthquake or something, right?
Right.
So, yeah. All right. What to tell folks? Live for Longevity starts on September 28th. And we are going to be talking about it a fair amount. And so if that is something that you are interested in, then you want to make sure, even if you're on our regular mailing list, you want to make sure that you are on our Live for Longevity interest list, because that's going to put you in the mailing list to get the discount, to get some free videos from the course. So you can see, oh, is this the kind of thing that I think will be interesting for me? You're going to get all kinds of other useful educational content from us. So we offer this course usually twice a year. This year, the only time we're offering it is in September. So if you've been thinking about it for a while and you're interested, check out the show notes for the link to get on our interest list. All right. So in today's episode, we are talking about Dr. Louisa Nicola. It's one of those people who has two first names. We're going to cover her branding, which is almost entirely about Alzheimer's disease. And we're going to do some myth busting on her claims. We are also going to look at how her messaging and her brand has evolved over the years. And we're going to highlight her particular tricks that she uses to get people to buy her products, which we call mechanism theater. We'll define these all for you. Evidence cosplay, and the fear to action marketing pipeline, all of which we'll discuss in this episode.
All right. Why are we talking about Louisa Nicola? Well, if you are on Instagram and you follow us and you follow people like us, you may have also seen some posts from Louisa Nicola. She's an online personality / clinical figure, and her MO is turning Alzheimer's prevention, menopause, exercise, and women's brain health into one urgent message. Some of her advice is generally good, and that is true for anyone with a platform, because if it's all bad and bullshit, no one's gonna believe anything that is said. But because some of her advice is generally good around exercise, strength training, sleep, and cardiovascular fitness, she is able to thread in a lot of information that is not good. But the way she presents information is one of the ways that she's able to slide this pseudoscience and misinformation in undercover. So Sarah already mentioned a couple of terms that we use to name these strategies, but basically she'll turn mechanisms, associations, or preliminary evidence into certainty, into very certain confident claims, into protocols, which she has developed products around and sells, and then fear. Okay, so as we know, fear is a great way to convince people to take action, specifically to buy stuff from you. So we also have to mention that she sometimes presents information completely incorrectly. Like if you look at what she's reporting on and read it yourself, you'll notice that she gets it completely wrong. So it makes us wonder if can she read? Did she read it? One of those,
Yeah. I mean, obviously she can read, but did she read it? Seems to be a question a lot of the time.
Yeah. You may know her from the Diary of a CEO episode, which is where you might know a lot of these people that occupy this space of pseudoscience and misinformation. She's also on Dr. Von der Wright's podcast. We've done episodes about Dr. Von der Wright. She has a podcast, and she interviewed Louisa Nicola. The Diary of a CEO episode is titled "The Disease That Starts in Your 30s But Kills You in Your 70s." And it's subtle. And then the Dr. Von der Wright episode is called "Why Women Are 6 Times the Alzheimer's Risk."
Oh, dear Lord.
Yeah. You might also know her from the viral Kelly Casperson clip where she said, "The female brain literally eats itself during menopause without hormone therapy," right? Which is just batshit. Okay, just batshit. Okay, so here are our main questions in this episode regarding Louisa Nicola. How does someone like Louisa Nicola take a legitimate scientific concern, the fact that women are disproportionately affected by Alzheimer's, and then transform it into an entire brand ecosystem? That's what we're looking at today.
Yeah. Okay, so before we get into the who and why of Louisa Nicola specifically, we want to make sure that we're all on the same page about what we do know about Alzheimer's and dementia prevention that is provable. The reason we're doing this is because one of Louisa Nicola's biggest sales tricks, as Laura was saying, is to take some incredibly preliminary, sometimes just animal studies, sometimes pilot studies, always more studies are needed studies, and then just present them to the general public as if they are stone cold facts. And this is not just Louisa Nicola. This is all of the grifters. This is Mary Lou Haver. This is Vonda Wright, right? Kelly Casper. It's all of them do this, where there's a tiny bit of preliminary, this is interesting. And they're like, it's proof. So let's get some facts. So what is Alzheimer's? Alzheimer's is a type of dementia. There's actually many types of dementia. Some of them are associated with things like Parkinson's disease or stroke. Some of them are just general degradation over time. So if we talk about Alzheimer's disease specifically, there's actually two types, which I didn't know before I started researching this. The first type is genetic, and the genetic type affects roughly 1 to 3% of the population. This means it runs in your family, and you are at an incredibly high risk of getting it, right? Much more so than the general public. This is a very, very unfortunate genetic condition that might be handed down to you. There's also a non-genetic type of Alzheimer's, and that's basically if everybody else got Alzheimer's. So that's roughly the 95 to 99% of the rest of the population. So Louisa Nicola often refers to Alzheimer's as being 95% or 99% avoidable. I think this is what she's referring to. I think this is the number she's referring to, but like, that's not what that number means.
Yeah. I think it's important to realize too that you can have Alzheimer's due to both causes, right? They could be genetic causes and non-genetic causes, right? And I think it's also important to note, and we're going to talk much more about this, that not all non-genetic causes are entirely unavoidable. Okay.
Right.
Because shit happens.
Yeah.
And we don't, believe it or not, control every single aspect of our life, nor are we aware of every single threat to our health all the time.
Exactly.
Because we are not omniscient and all capable and all,
Okay. So in terms of risk factor for getting Alzheimer's, the single biggest risk factor, as with most diseases, pretty much everything, is getting older. Because the longer you're alive, the more changes are happening to your tissues, right? The more possible mutations might be created, right? After that biggest risk factor, then there are some other genetic mutations separate from that 1 to 3% of genetic occurrence. And then there's also a bunch of lifestyle factors. And then there's also some factors that are actually, if you're at risk from this factor, you personally probably can't do anything about it because it would involve government policy changing things like air quality, right?
Right.
Women do have a higher lifetime risk than men, but that difference is much smaller than the effect of just aging. And researchers are still working to figure out why women have a higher risk. But what I want to make a point out about with this is that Louisa Nicola's biggest selling points is, one of her biggest selling points is that women are most at risk, but the Alzheimer's Association says that age is the highest risk, not gender. Like that's the first risk on the list, right? Not just being a woman, but it's just how old you are.
Yeah, and I want to note that about this situation where getting older is the single biggest risk factor for dementia and Alzheimer's. We're going to talk about how Louisa Nicola will often state that, this is not a natural part of the aging process, that this is something we can prevent,
Mm.
Stop treating dementia or Alzheimer's as her area of focus like an inevitability. It's not a natural part of the aging process. And the thing is that no disease really is a natural part of the aging process. However, as was just stated, an overwhelming majority of chronic neurodegenerative disease states do occur in older adults because of aging. So it's associated with age, but not necessarily caused by it. And
Right.
I just wanted to state that because what I think Louisa Nicola does a lot of the time is she creates this narrative that like everyone is just kind of accepting that this is what happens, right? And that she tries to single out Alzheimer's as being specifically different in that it's not a natural part of the aging process. It's like, well, no disease technically is, but age is actually the biggest risk factor, right?
Right.
Okay.
Well,
So,
and also the purpose of her doing that is so that she can sell you her product.
right.
Right.
She needs to create tension between herself and what she's saying, and then what this amorphous kind of unnamed entity is saying, right? That's the enemy, right? So the enemy wants you to believe that this is all just a natural part of the aging process.
Nothing you can do. Yeah.
Right. And you're just accepting it. You're just going to lie down and take it. Right. And so there's this story that's created around like her being sort of the bringer of the truth and the hero, and then this enemy entity that is oftentimes science and what science has done to women, or the pharmaceutical company and the way that they lie, or doctors who just want to keep you sick, or just this general idea that it's a natural part of the aging process. It's like, first of all, no one said that. It's not a natural part of the aging process, but age is the biggest risk factor.
Right.
Okay. All right, just because of what aging does to our body, right? So, a couple of things like changes in protein homeostasis, inflammation, vascular health, mitochondrial function. All of these processes are altered as we age, and this increases susceptibility to a neurodegenerative disease like Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
Okay, and yes, there are things we can do to mitigate that risk, but it is a part of the process. Okay, so we're going to look at a paper by the Lancet called Dementia Prevention, Intervention, and Care, 2024 report of the Lancet Standing Commission. Okay, so this is a big paper that draws on a lot of different types of evidence, some of which is observational in nature, some of which include randomized controlled trials and also systematic reviews and meta-analyses, some of which look at more mechanistic findings, some that take into account expert consensus, expert reports and consensus statements. So it's a mishmash of a lot of things. On a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being weak, 5 being very, very strong, this one is probably at about a 4. So it's quite good.
Why would you not give it a 5?
Because of the leaning into observational associations.
Okay, fair.
Yeah.
The commission, the last time it met was in 2020. So it's updated it for 2024. It added 2 new things to the risk factor list in 2024. But my sense is that they're drawing on all available evidence and trying to come up with a list of what these risk factors are.
Yeah, and they hedge their claims, very, very scientifically and, AKA responsibly.
Right, exactly.
By, basically adjusting the reader's sort of expectations for what like certainty we can assign to these findings and what these findings actually mean. So anyway, great paper, important paper, recent paper, all about dementia, not Alzheimer's, but dementia, right? All Alzheimer's is dementia, but not all dementia is Alzheimer's. Okay.
Yeah.
Dementia is a bigger umbrella term. And so the commission is going to go through some possible mechanisms for these 14 risk factors that influence dementia. And the mechanisms they emphasize, it's important to realize, operate through more than one pathway or rely on more than one system and are multi-influential and factorial in nature, right? So it's not this or that, right? It's a kind of everything together type lens that you have to be looking through here. So this paper discusses the evidence for dementia prevention and risk reduction across the lifespan. And there are a couple of different categories in which we can think about these strategies, what particularly we are impacting within our body to reduce risk. Okay, so the first is about building cognitive and brain reserve, right? So cognitive reserve or brain reserve is the ability of the brain to be able to tolerate damage or disease before symptoms become apparent. And there are a couple of different ways in which we believe this happens, okay? One is through higher educational attainment. In other words, lower educational attainment could be considered a risk factor for dementia, and higher educational attainment and or engaging in cognitively stimulating work are thought to be ways in which we can build cognitive reserve, okay?
Yeah. It's a little bit of like use it or lose it, right? It's like do some hard thinking with your brain.
Yeah, exercise your brain.
Right.
Yeah. Another way is hearing loss. Okay, so hearing loss could be a considered the risk factor, right? And so finding ways to aid your hearing if you experience hearing loss appear to be protective against dementia. And I think this makes sense because if you can't hear, you're not as stimulated. If you can't hear what the person or people next to you are talking about, you can't engage cognitively in that. And again, it kind of goes back to this like cognitively stimulating quote unquote work or just cognitively stimulating existence, right? You need to be able to participate in conversation, which can be cognitively stimulating. But if you can't hear, you can't really, maybe you tune out and start thinking about other things.
My sense of the way that a lot of older people feel about hearing aids is that they've been embarrassed to use them in the past, right? They don't want to look like they need a big bulky thing on their ear. Now, a good thing, they've gotten much, much smaller and almost impossible to see, which is really good.
Yeah.
But I think this is not like people who are born deaf and learn sign language. This is people who have lost their hearing and maybe aren't being as social anymore because they can't hear anything. So they're not going out. So they're not getting the stimulus.
Exactly. And then vision loss, which is something new that was added, right? That's one of the new two things that were added. And so the exact mechanism is really uncertain, but again, it comes back to this idea that reduced sensory input leads to reduced cognitive stimulation, right? So vision loss is the risk factor. The way we reduce the risk of dementia is to do the things that we need to do to make it so that we can see. And then finally, in this category of building cognitive reserve is social isolation. And this is a really big one that's becoming more and more talked about, I notice, which is this epidemic of social isolation, which I think started before the pandemic, but became very severe during the pandemic. Social contact helps build cognitive reserve. It helps to promote also healthy behaviors. It reduces stress and inflammation. So it has a lot of crossover with some other categories we're going to talk about. And of course, also it creates cognitive stimulation.
Exactly.
Another category is to reduce vascular damage, right? So this is where cardiovascular health overlaps with brain health. Another recent finding, in addition to vision loss being a risk factor for dementia, is that high levels of LDL cholesterol are also a risk factor for dementia.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense because, I don't know much about this, but I know my dad had vascular disease and kidney disease and experienced some cognitive decline, very noticeable cognitive decline. Dementia, not Alzheimer's, but dementia in his later years as probably a result of maybe, and this is probably overly simplified, but his body's ability to get blood to his brain, right?
Right.
So also other risk factors that are under the category of vascular damage include high blood pressure, obviously smoking, right? And then diabetes. Again, this one's not as well understood, but diabetes likely contributes through multiple pathways, but also it is involved in inflammation, metabolic dysfunction. So it's not solely a vascular contributor. And then also obesity. Those are all under the umbrella of vascular damage. And then we have stress and inflammation as being another category. Here they include depression, and the Lancet treated depression and social isolation as separate risk factors, although they often coexist. Mm-hmm. And then here's where we have physical inactivity. Okay. Mm-hmm. This is where Louisa Nicola focuses a lot of her messaging around, is this particular risk factor of physical inactivity. But what we'll soon learn is that she selects out only one of very many ways to be physically active and decides that that's the way you have to be physically active, even though there is literally no evidence for this claim, right? We'll get into it. Okay. It likely reduces stress and inflammation, but of course it also benefits vascular health, right? Yeah. And potentially also cognitive reserve. So there are some that weren't clearly categorizable according to the Lancet, but they also deserve mention here, which is excessive alcohol consumption. Mm-hmm. This could fall under the category of reducing stress and inflammation, but it also likely affects dementia through many different mechanisms, including direct neurotoxicity, and then also vascular disease. And then finally, traumatic brain injury. This is one of those things that shit happens, right? Yeah. You can't always control everything that happens to you. Sometimes you get hit in the head.
Yes.
And traumatic brain injury, obviously is going to increase. Yeah. I mean, that one's just, it seems kind of common sense, right?
Right.
Yeah. If you play a sport, right, like football, or you're a boxer, or even soccer, rugby, these all place you at a much higher risk of dementia. Yeah. If you're a position that's getting hit a lot. Right. But also swimming, I have to sign a waiver every year. My daughter does a swim team about hitting her head, and you just be walking along and a branch falls on your head too. Shit happens. People get hit in the head. Yeah.
Under the category of choosing to put yourself in a situation where you might be more at risk for a traumatic brain injury, American football was a horrible example of this, still is in some ways. And we know about all of that CTE.
Yes.
And there was a great documentary about it a few years ago. And it showed how the opening credits for Monday Night Football were two helmets ramming into each other. Yeah. And there was this idea that if I have my helmet on, it's fine. I can smash my head into somebody else. But unfortunately, we've discovered that's not the case.
Yeah, it's the brain hitting the inside of the
inside
skull.
Of your head. Exactly. Yeah. People think your brain is actually attached to your skull. Newsflash, it's not. And then the other people that often get a traumatic brain injury are people in the military who do things like bomb explosion. What's it called when you make a bomb not dangerous anymore?
Let me see. A bomb disposal technician.
Yeah. In any event, I think if you're in the military at all, you're at risk of bombs going off near you, things like that. And that's another one where traumatic brain injury happens very, very often.
Yes. And then one more to put under the category of uncategorized is air pollution.
Yeah.
They place it under vascular damage, but it also potentially could go under inflammation. This is a very different one because this would involve some population level policy intervention rather than an individual behavior change.
Right. You may not be able to move away from the neighborhood that you live in where the air is not great, right? That may or may not be up to you.
Yeah. Whereas the rest of them are potentially, depending on how privileged you are and what your access is to healthcare and a lot of other, education, or all of the rest of them are potentially under the control of an individual, but air pollution, not so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
We just discussed whether they're all really modifiable. Here's where I want to talk about this 45% figure. Okay.
Yeah.
So the Lancet estimates that about 45% of dementia cases are statistically attributable to these 14 potentially modifiable risk factors. And they found this after accounting for the fact that many people, of course, have more than one risk factor.
Right.
So this estimate comes from what's called population attributable fraction modeling, which combines, how common each risk factor is in the population, how strongly each risk factor is associated with dementia, how much overlap there is among the risk factors, and what this population attributable fraction estimates is basically that if a risk factor truly causes dementia, and if it could be completely eliminated from the population, how many dementia cases might theoretically not occur? Okay, so this is, if you're a little lost or a little overwhelmed, just know that this 45% is coming from a statistical model. Okay,
Right.
it's not the result of a single intervention study. It does not mean 45% of people can prevent dementia. It does not mean eliminating these risk factors would definitely prevent 45% of dementia. It does not mean 45% of dementia is proven to be preventable. It does not mean every person can realistically eliminate every risk factor.
Right.
It simply means that if we were to completely eliminate risk factors from the population, this is the number, 45% of dementia cases might theoretically not occur. Theoretically not occur.
Right. It's all theoretical.
So this number is like, it is embedded in qualification after qualification after qualification after qualification, drawing from 14 different modifiable factors that overlap, that are multifactorial in influence, that may or may not be causal. That, do you see how complex this is and how much evidence went into this paper, which is quite a strong paper, but still also has to lean on observational data, because again, we can't set up one-to-one longitudinal studies looking at multiple different interventions or realities, right? And then see, like, did this person get dementia? It's so complex. I think that it's just important. The reason we went through all of this wasn't to make you pass out or feel like you need to take a nap. It's so that you understand, when we talk about Louisa Nicola's claims, what she's saying versus what the evidence is saying. When people sign up for Lift for Longevity, what are we actually giving them?
They're getting a lot. So our 6-month Lift for Longevity barbell course includes 2 live classes a week taught by Laurel and myself, with recordings that you then are able to access forever after the 6 months as well.
That's 48 live classes.
There is also pre-recorded content where we talk about important strength training terminology that you're going to want to understand. We talk about osteoporosis, which is a big concern for women as we get older, and that has been shown in evidence to be something you can improve with resistance training. We have demo videos of all of the exercises that you're going to do in the course, so you can always refer back to those videos as well as receive all of the live coaching that you get in the class. We also have some warm-up videos. We have some other special videos for things like if your ankles or your wrists need a little more attention. You also get to join our private circle group, which is like a private Facebook group, with the emphasis being on private, which is where you access us, you ask your questions of us, you can submit video demonstration, like short clips of you doing an exercise, and we'll give you feedback on your form. So that's what you get if you join this course. And the purpose of it being 6 months is we're really trying to establish this as a habit. And the nice thing as well is once you're finished with the 6-month course, you could just start from the beginning again. And because you're going to be stronger if you've been lifting weights for 6 months, those numbers will increase and you could just keep doing the program on your own forever and ever.
If you would like to make sure you hear about a future upcoming Lift for Longevity course, get on our interest list via the link in our show notes.
All right, so now we know what are the risk factors and what percentage is modeled that might be possible to reduce. Let's talk about who Louisa Nicola is, what is she up to? So Louisa Nicola is a clinical neurophysiologist. Some people say, or I think she says, she's an Alzheimer's focused brain health expert. She's the founder of Neuroathletics, and she's host of a podcast called the Neuro Experience Podcast. She currently or in the past has worked with elite athletes, executives, high performers. Her brand is sort of this mashup of brain optimization, always be optimizing, Alzheimer's prevention, elite performance goals, women's midlife and menopause fears, and something called protocol culture, which is when general evidence-based behaviors get repackaged as precise formulas. So instead of the more general advice being move more and sleep better, now the protocol is follow my exact system or you're leaving your brain vulnerable. She's selling you, supposedly, a roadmap for protecting your future brain. And I mean, look, I think that's a really compelling offer because Alzheimer's is a disease that people really fear getting, right? It's this idea of being, I'm here, but I'm not totally here. I'm alive, but I'm not aware of my surroundings. I don't recognize people anymore. It's a scary sounding disease, don't you think?
Yeah, very scary. So Alzheimer's is I guess, the most common cause of dementia. And I guess it accounts for 60 to 80% of dementia cases. And there's a lot of different changes that happen to the brain as the result of Alzheimer's. But what it really results in is your inability or having problems forming new memories before you're affecting other cognitive functions. It's very much an identity robbing disease. And what's I think most disturbing about it is that it robs you of your identity, but the people who suffer, I think, probably as much or more, I don't know, people who suffer severely from this identity disruption or degradation are your loved ones, because they are no longer necessarily people that you recognize the same way or at all, and therefore you to them don't really know who they are.
Yeah.
It's devastating.
Totally. I've worked with patients with dementia, not with Alzheimer's specifically. And I will say you often typically see with these patients that they get angry sometimes, and they get angry because they're frustrated. And I would be frustrated too if I could not remember this morning, let alone yesterday, let alone 5 minutes ago. I think what you said, robbing you of your identity, I think that's exactly it. And I think that's something that a lot of people are scared of, right? And so, she's leading into that fear by making really unsupported claims about how you can avoid it, essentially. So before we get into these claims, if you only just heard about Louisa Nicola from like the Kelly Casperson, your brain is getting eaten alive conversation, you might assume like, oh, this is the Alzheimer's lady. She's always been the Alzheimer's lady. But her earlier brand was much more about like neuroscience and optimization and elite athletic performance, not so much degenerative brain disease. So in the beginning, sort of early 2000s to 2012, she was actually an elite triathlon competitor. She represented Australia internationally. And apparently, I didn't go into this too much, but she had an accident, and that the rehab sparked her interest in the brain and the nervous system. In 2012, she went to the University of Sydney and got a degree called a Master of Medicine. So she studied clinical neurophysiology. This is not, I just want to clarify, this is not a medical degree. But she says this is where she realized that elite sport teams were, leaving something on the table in theory by not focusing on brain function. So then 2014, she forms her company Neuroathletics. And the focus is about helping athletes optimize performance, reaction time, cognition, that kind of stuff. In 2016, she relocated to the US and started working with NFL players, NBA players, things like that. So now she's really in the like US professional sports executive performance world. They're talking about things like sleep, nutrition, VO2 max, supplementation, hydration, da da da. I'm not really talking about Alzheimer's very much at this point.
So around 2020 to 2022, her brand became much more embedded in the US podcast / longevity ecosystem. And this is also the period where people like Andrew Huberman, Peter Attia, Gabrielle Lyon, and other optimization / longevity figures become central to the online health conversation. So to be clear, we do not know what is in Louisa Nicola's head. We do not know and cannot say that she definitely moved to the US and decided to chase trends. But we can say that her messaging evolved in a very similar direction as the broader US longevity movement did. So around 2021, 2022, 2023, the online health conversation shifted toward lifespan, health span, biomarkers, protocols, and optimization for everyone. And within this conversation, there is a metric shit ton of mechanistic theater going on. What is mechanistic theater, you ask? We've defined this term, which I believe we are responsible for creating.
That's it.
When we talked about Stacy Sims and make Stacy Sims make sense, she is a perpetrator of mechanistic or mechanism theater. So this is when you use dense biological or physiological explanations to make a claim, something that you are claiming, sound more scientifically credible or certain. But when you dig into the claim, you find that the evidence for it is extremely thin or non-existent.
Mm-hmm.
It is a type of theater.
Yes, it is.
Okay. There's a lot of mechanism theater around longevity, overstating evidence, misinterpreting evidence, cherry picking evidence, using fear mongering.
Mm-hmm.
And so now the message is, how do we preserve the brain for the next 50 years, right? That is a much larger market than elite athletes for Louisa Nicola to target. This is the optimization bro tech, but no longer just bro tech crowd, the disposable income crowd for sure. The people trying to find, the exact right formula to becoming as close to immortal as humanly possible, or people who are just afraid of dying.
Yeah, I think that's the same thing.
Yeah.
All right. So then after this, now she's sort of like in this world of longevity and biomarkers. Then around 2023, Alzheimer's becomes this organizing principle. So now everything that she talks about goes back to Alzheimer's prevention, women's brain health, menopause, biomarkers, etc. This is also when she begins publishing work specifically related to resistance training and Alzheimer's disease, while also making Alzheimer's the dominant theme of her podcast and her media appearances. So now her brand has this one unifying story, which is everything matters because everything affects Alzheimer's, right? I mean, that's a really solid brand. With that, you could be like, listen, don't use that toothpaste. It's going to give you Alzheimer's. Don't do this. It's going to give you Alzheimer's, right?
Yeah.
At the same time, and I don't know if this was on purpose, if she saw something in the water, or if it just kind of happened, menopause commercialism around the same time also exploded. And women's midlife health became a huge commercial sector in online health. Menopause, HRT, or MHT, I should say, protein, creatine, osteoporosis, brain fog, metabolic health, right? These all become these very big topics. We get the menopause who suddenly occur, right? We've talked a lot about all of them on previous episodes. So now this is actually an incredibly useful entry point, because if your brand is Alzheimer's prevention, menopause is a great entry point, because one of the most common menopause complaints is brain fog. And so it's a very easy jump to, wait a minute, do I have Alzheimer's? Is this the beginning of dementia? What's wrong with my brain? Right? So the message is lift weights, not because muscle matters, but because it could determine whether or not you recognize your grandchildren. I mean, the stakes couldn't be higher, right?
I call this the brand glue.
Ooh.
It's the glue that holds everything she says and all of her narratives and claims and products together.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very important to have brand glue.
Oh, do we have brand glue?
Yeah, we do. I think we do. I mean,
Okay,
we can have a meeting about it later because I don't know that we're totally 100% clear on it, but I'm sure we have it somewhere in some closet.
Right. Somebody wrote it down.
Got to dig for it in the craft drawer. Yeah, brand glue. So it basically, it's like a thesis statement, you know? So Peter Attia, perhaps, okay, his brand glue, I hesitate to say is. I feel like he's finished. His brand glue was that modern medicine waits until you're sick. So by aggressively identifying and managing risk decades earlier, you can dramatically extend your healthy years of life. And this has allowed him to push a lot of very strange interventions.
Yes.
And to justify them.
Although the message itself is not totally wrong.
It's not totally wrong.
That's the problem. That's why it's always a problem, because the basic message is not totally wrong.
It's not totally wrong.
Yeah. They just then take it to crazy places.
Yeah. And so his optimization strategies, the use of metformin, all the crazy shit that he did in the name of aggressively identifying and managing risk decades earlier.
Right.
Yeah. And then we have Stacey Sims, right? What's her brand glue? Women are not small men.
Right.
Okay. And okay, sure, women are not small men. They're also not large rodents. Okay,
and I'm also not a small man. I'm kind of a tall man.
Yeah.
So her brand glue falls apart pretty quickly.
But she uses this one short, pithy statement to justify all of her female-specific training, nutrition, recovery, optimization advice, because the message there is that, okay, women are not small men, okay? There is some truth in that. Of course, women are not small men. And also, yes, female physiology is different from male physiology in some ways. But when you look at the evidence for the outcomes of interest, it turns out that men and women respond very, very similarly to exercise, to nutrition, and to recovery interventions. And so then she will use things like rat studies to show that female physiology is different. And that's where we're like, well, but women are not large rodents.
Right.
Right?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on to talk about Louisa Nicola's big brand glue, her big theme now, which is that Alzheimer's is almost certainly coming for you if you're a woman, but you can definitely out-train it. And her recurring themes include Alzheimer's starts in your 30s. Women are at a much higher risk. Okay, it's true. Exercise is the most powerful intervention. I don't know if that's been shown. Resistance training in zone 5 are especially protective. There's no evidence for that. Menopause and estrogen loss is a brain health crisis, believe it or not, also unproven. Creatine, omega-3s, sauna and cold therapy, cognitive training, and protocols of the like can optimize the brain. Maybe, but there's not a lot of strong evidence, if any, for those claims. So we're going to go through all these claims because the problem is not that everything she's saying is wrong. Some of the things on the list, like the fact that women are at a higher risk of Alzheimer's than men, is true, but others are at best a big stretch. And at worst, just flat out, she pulled it out of her ass incorrect, okay? And this is a feature of grift. This is not a bug. This is a feature of grift. This is how you spot grift. With all of these online personality doctors, the problem is that some of what they are saying is true or based on the truth, but then they overstretch that truth and they turn it into a story, oftentimes a scary story, that of course has a product attached to it.
All right. Let's start with what she gets broadly correct before we talk about what she gets completely wrong. So she is right that Alzheimer's is a big problem in the US. The Alzheimer's Association estimates 7.4 million Americans age 65 or over are living with Alzheimer's in 2026. So that's about 1 in 9 people over the age of 65 that has Alzheimer's.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a big problem. She is also right-ish that women are disproportionately affected. That's not true in all countries. One meta-analysis that had nearly 1 million people in it from 205 studies in 37 countries identified that, yes, increased incidence and prevalence of dementia in women compared with men were explained by differences in life expectancy and education. But she often says the difference between men and women is not explained by life expectancy, but actually it is. Women live longer. The longer you're aging, the longer that aging process is going to have the organic breakdown is the human condition, right? So of the 7.4 million people that have Alzheimer's in the US, about 61% of them are women. So that's often rounded to almost 2/3, right?
I want to say too that recent US estimates support the statement that about 10.8 to 11% of Americans age 65 and older have Alzheimer's dementia, and that is a 1 in 9 estimate.
That is a lot of people.
That's crazy.
It's a lot of people.
Yeah.
This is people over 65.
65.
Yes, not
all people. But then 2/3 of those
are women. Yeah. Okay. So why women more than men? Part of it is because of longer life expectancy, even though she, for some reason, says it isn't. There are other plausible, like biological and social contributors, but there's no single agreed upon explanation as to why more women than men demonstrated in the research. This also means, according to the Alzheimer's Association report from 2025, that women have about double the lifetime risk, 20% versus 10%, than men do of developing Alzheimer's. Mm-hmm. So she gets that kind of right-ish little asterisk next to that.
Yeah. She's also right. Louisa Nicola is right that exercise matters. Mm-hmm. Physical inactivity is recognized as one of those 14 modifiable dementia risk factors by the 2024 Lancet Commission, which we talked about earlier. And again, estimated that up to 45% of dementia cases could theoretically be prevented or delayed if we eliminated physical activity as one of those 14 modifiable risk factors. We eliminated physical activity along with the other 13, right? Okay, so also, Louisa Nicola is right that resistance training is relevant, okay? And she herself has co-authored a 2024 narrative review describing how preliminary data shows that resistance training has the potential to be beneficial to people with Alzheimer's. Cool. True. Yes. Couple things. A narrative review is when experts read studies and then write a summary of what they think the evidence is showing. Unlike a systematic review, they don't have to follow a strict pre-planned method for finding or selecting studies. And so there is a lot more room for judgment and bias in what gets included and how it's interpreted. Now, they're valuable for generating ideas. They're also valuable for summarizing a field, but because they don't have to systematically include all the evidence, they're way more vulnerable to cherry picking than a systematic review or meta-analysis. A narrative review represents an interpretation of the literature, not some new experimental evidence, and it definitely does not possess the rigor of a systematic review. It's actually a relatively weak form of evidence.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's take just a brief look at this narrative review, all right? It looked at a number of studies, 2 of which were particularly strong, on the stronger side. So one of them is called the Brain Power Study. It looked at 155 women aged 65 to 75 years old and compared high intensity resistance training, which was, in the 6 to 8 rep range. So yes, I would agree. That's pretty high. I think we could safely call that high intensity resistance training. The only problem was that the control was not another intensity of resistance training. It was like balance and tone classes. Okay, and then another trial, which was quite large, 100 adults with mild cognitive impairment, did high intensity resistance training. And they were compared against two active controls, one of which was aerobic exercise, and the other was some kind of balance, kind of stretching, relaxation class. So the rest of the controls, from what I can tell in the studies that she's using to write this narrative review, use a non-resistance training control group to compare against some form of resistance training. And the problem with that is that Louisa Nicola will often make claims that it has to be heavy, that the resistance training you do for your brain and your brain health has to be heavy resistance training. But notice how none of these actually looked at heavy resistance training against moderate or light loads. Mm-hmm. It looked at resistance training against non-resistance training. So what we can say very, I think, confidently, potentially, is that resistance training is good for your brain.
Yeah.
It's sufficient to lift heavy, but it's not necessarily required. If you want to understand better the difference between what is sufficient versus necessary, if you want to understand more clearly what is the difference between sufficient versus necessary, and this is a really important distinction, especially if we're trying to make exercise more, not less accessible to people, is that we shouldn't say that something that is sufficient is necessary, because other things could also be sufficient. Right. And wouldn't we like for people to know all of the options that they have so that they can choose the one that works best for them? No, Louisa Nicola likes to pull out heavy resistance training, and she doesn't have any evidence to say that it's necessary. She does only have evidence to say that it's sufficient. All right. Louisa Nicola uses this paper that she authored and cites it as evidence all over the place. Sarah, where does she cite it as evidence?
Oh my God. So she, in her Substack, which is a very active part of her social media, she made it like a huge news about resistance training and dementia. She made an Instagram reel about it. She doesn't just cite her own study, that's not weird. People do that all the time. The study says things like preliminary findings, suggests possibilities, could reduce risk. But then suddenly by the social media post, it becomes the science says yes. Targets early Alzheimer's risk markers. It becomes much more confident and certain.
Yeah, and to be fair, like this evidence looks at how resistance training alters the structure of the brain, which brain structure is considered a marker of dementia or Alzheimer's. But what these studies don't actually look at is if resistance training reduces Alzheimer's risk directly. Okay, that's number one. Number two is that she can, I think, very safely make the claim that resistance training could or can reduce the risks of Alzheimer's because of its impact on brain structure. Mm-hmm. And I think that physical activity includes resistance training, and the more physically active you are, it's true, that does reduce your risk of dementia, okay? But what I don't think she can say, but she says all the time, is that it has to be heavy.
Yeah. So, as we said, it's not weird that she published a narrative review. Stacy Sims publishes tons of them. Lots of scientists publish narrative reviews, but it's how she talks about the paper afterwards, where we're seeing her starting to stretch the research. Like on Diary of a CEO, she recommended lifting at about 80% of your 1 rep max to produce neural effects, which is what we would call heavy lifting, right? It's getting up there. But, and I love that they did this, that show actually has an independent research aspect where they go in and they talk back to whatever claims the person is making. And so that show's independent research notes pointed out that systematic reviews and meta-analyses do not identify a hard intensity cutoff for neural adaptations, right? It's not like 80% or bust. Rather, sufficiently challenging resistance training can produce neural changes, not a specific load, right?
How many episodes have we spent talking about the difference between heavy and sufficiently challenging?
Seriously, right? So the certainty of her recommendation is much greater than the certainty of the evidence. So let's look at where she actually definitely over packages the evidence and gets into these myths. So We talked about this at the beginning that this is maybe why you know her. So I want to play the intro to the episode of the Vonda Wright podcast where she was on as a guest. The episode is titled Why Women Are at 6 Times the Alzheimer's Risk, and then in parentheses, and the exercise protocol that fixes it.
Oh God.
Right?
It's just so awful.
Vonda Wright is trash with that episode title, right? How dare you claim that you're on the side of women with that fucking National Enquirer sounding, one weird trick that fixes Alzheimer's. BS fear-mongering asshat of an episode title. I hate it so much. I don't know if you can tell. So this clip it should put the fear of God into you. And it also might make you wonder if Vonda Wright is a little drunk.
Alzheimer's disease is not a disease of your 80s, it's a disease of your 30s and 40s because it takes 20 to 30 years for this buildup to occur.
It's like osteoporosis. It's not a disease of old people. It is a disease of young people manifesting as an old person.
Up to 95% of all Alzheimer's disease cases, which is currently 60 million people worldwide, could have been prevented. If you are a woman, and you have one copy of the ApoE4 gene that raises your risk by 6 times, your insurance policy is exercise. Your brain will only survive if it does hard things. To preserve cognitive reserve, you must do hard things. You must shock it.
Is that why I get off my treadmill and I am smarter than I ever am? My brain is like on fire.
Your brain is like use it or lose it. And if you don't use it, it's like, well, I need to preserve energy, so I'm just going to kill off this area of the brain because I don't need it. Shut it down.
I believe you when you say this. You are going to cure Alzheimer's by the end of your career.
I mean, I don't believe that, but anyhow. Yeah, it's just
The
it's super
fucking
bananas.
music.
The music, what does she say? Is that why I get off my treadmill and I'm smarter than I ever am? I'm like, smarter than you ever am? It doesn't sound smarter than you ever am. Okay. So
I think that the music reminded me a lot of that, that television series called 24?
Yes.
Kiefer Sutherland was like always like diffusing a bomb in like the last 5 seconds of the episode, and then the episode would end as like the bomb started to explode, and then you'd have to like turn on the next one.
Yeah. All right. So let's unpack some of these myths. So she says that very clearly here. She says women are at 6 times the risk of getting Alzheimer's. So here's what she actually says. If you are a woman and you have one copy of the ApoE4 gene, that gives you a 6 times greater risk of Alzheimer's disease. So let's just talk about this for a second. If you're someone who's read a lot about Alzheimer's, you're probably familiar with this, but if you aren't, like I wasn't, ApoE4 is one version of the ApoE gene. The ApoE gene tells your body how to make apolipoprotein E, which is a protein that helps transport cholesterol and other fats around the body, including in the brain. So there's several versions of this gene, and they have definitely identified that the ApoE4 version is associated with a higher risk of developing later onset Alzheimer's. You inherit a copy of this gene from each parent. So that means you could have 0 of this variation, the ApoE4 variation, or you could have 1 copy of it, or you could have 2 copies of it. And the more that you have, the greater at risk you are, right? So there is a 2016 review that summarizes that this ApoE4 risk is greater for women than men. But again, we know that risk factors are not just one thing at a time. And even having that gene, the risk of people who have that gene is still going to vary, whether you have 1 copy or 2 copies, what your age is, your ancestry, what you're comparing it against, right? Because a risk is not, it's a factor, it's a percentage, right? So the bottom line is the size of the effect of this ApoE4 gene is still a very active area of research. So it is not at all accurate to summarize it simply as women with ApoE4 have 6 times the Alzheimer's risk. Also, in the title of the episode, it does not say women with this gene are at 6 times the Alzheimer's risk. The title of the episode is Why Women are at 6 times the Alzheimer's risk. So it's just absolute misappropriation of the data, right? So she takes what is a very complicated risk landscape, as we've been discussing, right? Lots of different factors, and she turns it into a headline that sounds like a diagnosis, right? If I read women are 6 times more likely to get it than men, that sounds to me like, well, fuck, I guess I'm getting it, right?
Yeah.
It's like a certainty in the language that just, it does not exist in the research.
Yeah.
Okay.
So her next claim, Alzheimer's starts in your 30s. So the Diary of a CEO episode that she was on is titled "The Disease That Starts in Your 30s but Kills You in Your 70s." So we're going to listen to a clip from the Diary of a CEO where we hear this old chestnut.
This disease, dementia or Alzheimer's disease, is a disease of midlife. And so it generally starts in our 30s. It starts in our 30s, but the first symptoms show up in our late 60s, 70s, and beyond.
When you say it starts?
Yeah. Our brain fully develops at around 25 years old, 25 to 30. And after that, that's when if we don't take care of our brain, we start getting a decline in these functions. Over time, through things such as sleep deprivation, poor diet, lack of physical activity, environmental toxins, this slowly erodes at the functioning of the brain. And over time, this starts to compound, because that's what biology is. Everything is compounding. One night of sleep deprivation raises your risk of amyloid beta, which is one of the hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease pathology, by 4%. That's just one night of sleep deprivation. Imagine a new mother or a shift worker or a physician in their residency getting countless nights of sleep deprivation day in and day out. Imagine all of that compounding. And what happens? Well, we end up with either neuronal loss, which is like the complete atrophy of certain parts of the brain. And that's what is mild cognitive impairment. Mild cognitive impairment is a pre-dementia state.
Okay. I think that's enough.
Mm-hmm. Mechanism theater much?
Yeah, right? Seriously.
I mean, she's literally fucking holding a brain in her hand.
I think
She's
part of the
sitting
reason...
there holding a fucking brain, and it has a name. She like named it Henry or something. I can't remember what the name was, but like,
I think what I hate so much is the proximity of her boobs to the brain. I think this is why I don't like her, and I feel this is not a real reason, but I'm certainly not trying to like shame anyone, but it's always lips and boobs and then terrifying facts. It is. If you look at her content, it's boobs, lips, fear. It's like Fox News, right?
Yeah.
Beautiful blonde woman being like, we bombed Iran today, right? Like, anyway.
The pitchfork waving mob is coming for you with that one, sir.
Yeah, I know. But you know what? Come at me. Tell me.
Come at me.
At this point, what do I care? All right.
Okay. So essentially what she's suggesting is that behaviors and lifestyle changes that we engage in our 30s impact our risk of dementia. But the problem with that statement is that while true, it is also literally true for every single chronic disease that is known. Okay. Now, there is real evidence that Alzheimer's pathology, yes, it can begin many years before symptoms. For example, the New England Journal of Medicine published a 20-year biomarker study in 2024 that found that Alzheimer's biomarkers were detectable in cerebrospinal fluid between 15 and 20 years before these same people were diagnosed with Alzheimer's dementia. But preclinical pathology is not the same thing as Alzheimer's starts in your 30s. Biomarker change, risk state, clinical disease, these are not like interchangeable terms. Okay, but when we say Alzheimer's, we mean disease, right? And so a more accurate statement possibly would be that Alzheimer's related biological changes may begin decades before symptoms in some people. Yeah. It's less scary,
It's more accurate.
It's more accurate.
I mean, another example that I think might resonate to some listeners is the idea of being pre-diabetic versus actually having diabetes. There are lots of people whose glucose range is in that like upper level of what's considered normal, or maybe a little bit above it, and they'll start to say, well, you have pre-diabetes. But as my internist patient told me when we were talking about this, he said, look, tons of people will have, quote, pre-diabetes and never actually get diabetes. This is not the same as that, but it's a similar kind of thing where it's like you could have biomarkers, whether or not that develops into full-blown Alzheimer's. It's not, you cannot say that confidently as a fact.
Yeah.
Okay. So new myth number 3, 95% of Alzheimer's cases could have been prevented. Okay. So we talked about the Lancet Commission already a lot, that it's talking about potentially preventing or delaying, possibly based on models, 45% of dementia cases.
If we removed those risk factors, if we eliminated them.
Yes. So it's certainly not talking about 95% of Alzheimer's cases, right? That estimate, that 45% refers to a population risk. It's not an individual person's guaranteed risk reduction, right? When they say up to 45% of dementia cases could be prevented by addressing certain risk factors, they're not talking about you. They're not saying if you do all the right things, you cut your risk by 45%. It means that if an entire population had perfect blood pressure, hearing, exercise, education, air quality, and so on, the total number of cases in that population might be about 45% lower. So a much more accurate statement, instead of Alzheimer's is 95% preventable, is some dementia risk is modifiable, and public health interventions may prevent or delay a substantial proportion of cases. But you can't sell shit with that sentence.
No.
Right? That's the problem. Hey everybody, it's Sarah here. So when we recorded this episode, it ended up being over 3 hours long. And we felt like that was a bit too much to ask of you. So we have split this episode into 2 parts. This is the end of part 1. And in 2 weeks, you'll get part 2, where we continue to break down these myths that Louisa Nicola is perpetrating. In the meantime, please rate, review, subscribe to our podcast. Get on the interest list if you are interested in joining our Lift for Longevity cohort this September. The link to that is in the show notes, and we will see you in 2 weeks.